I got a lot of great things to cover today, especially
Channel
something new that literally just came out in the news yesterday, and that is this guy. New species of batwing dinosaur discovered. And this was found in China, supposedly dated to 160 million years ago. And as you can see, now just keep in mind, this is an artist rendition, okay?
So that's not the actual picture of the creature
that
they
is
took
not
while
an
they were
actual
there.
picture,
Okay,
right?
making sure.
That is of the fossils.
This is what they interpret it as. And
Right,
that's
this is
one.
what
Right.
they've interpreted it as looking like. Now that doesn't mean that's how it actually looked in real life, okay? And that's pretty important. So they did find some things on it that make it kind of seem sort of an oddball group. They're not really sure because it has some things in common with bats, it has some things in common with birds, and they're calling it a dinosaur. So,
You know, it's interesting. There are a lot of creatures that are a mosaic.
Yeah,
You know, if
that's
you
what I was
think of a platypus, you know, it's got all sorts of different features. You know, it's got the bill of a duck, it's got
Right.
poison, it's got, you know, it looks kind of like a beaver. You know, it's got all sorts of little features. It lays eggs, actually, you know, which is kind of fascinating. Now, I don't know if a creature like this is a mosaic. You know, when you actually start looking at the text of the technical paper, I think it becomes more revealing. We talked to Dr. Gabriella Haynes, who's a paleontologist. She's on the panel oftentimes.
yeah.
And,
So she looked at the paper, the actual paper that was in Nature, and where it was the scientific paper was published. And she said that she's not sure entirely what to make of it, but it sure has a lot in common with birds, okay, versus a bat or a dinosaur or anything like that. And just so everyone's aware, the reason that they want to always call it a dinosaur, even if it looks like a bird, is because they believe that birds evolved from dinosaurs. So
they're
grouping those
trying to
together.
find a missing
Right.
link. So that's
Right.
why you see in your artist representation something that tries to mix these different features. But
Yes, so that's the actual paper from Nature, and so you can see the fossil there, and then they're sort of.
you know, that fossil doesn't look at all like that
That
artist
picture, I know.
representation.
Again,
Wow.
it's their rendition of it. And so she said because it has gizzard stones and what's called a pygostyle, which is kind of an area towards the, let's see if I can show it here. So let's see that picture. So where those big tail feathers are coming off of, that's what the pygostyle, it's fused vertebrae. And so that's very common in birds. Gizzard
Yeah,
stones are.
It's like a teeter-totter tail.
Yeah.
It's kind of an easy
Is that,
way
the,
to think
is that the
about it.
technical term?
You know,
It is.
Dr.
Yeah.
Menton, David Menton, he's an anatomist.
He's a
He's
sharp
used
guy.
that term. You know, I'm like, you know, that's an easy way to think about it. A teeter-totter tail.
Teeter-totter, not tater-tot, teeter-tot.
Right.
And she said its claw structure is very similar to that of a perching bird. Now, the one thing that does make it a bit unusual is the fact that it has very long finger-like projections like you would see on a bat. And they did find some soft tissue that seems to be sort of, they're calling it very membranous, like you would find on a bat wing. But a lot of it was disturbed or scraped away as they were cleaning the fossil, so it's hard for them to kind of evaluate it.
Yeah, so
we don't know
some of that
exactly what
evidence
it
has
is.
disappeared.
So it's an interesting creature, and that's about all we know,
You know,
for sure.
there are birds like a Haitson, if I'm pronouncing
Yeah.
that right. It looks like Hoatzin, but Haitson.
Right.
You know, it's actually got claws out on its wingtips, you know,
Right.
particularly in the juvenile stage, they kind of come and go. And it makes me wonder, you know, is it something like that? And I've also wondered, you know, because this is very small too.
It's only
very small.
57, well, they're not sure
There's some
what
guesswork, but
Okay, so the size, they said it was 57 grams, the initial estimate, but then they later changed it to 307 grams using another technique, and Dr. Haynes said to make it fit with the fossil they want this to be.
they want it to be something bigger.
So they're not sure what size
But the
it
point is, either way, it's small,
Right.
which
Yeah.
makes me wonder, was it in a developmental phase? You know, if
Right.
you guys have ever cracked open a chicken egg, you know, before it's fully developed. I grew up on a farm, we had a bunch of chickens. So, you know, I got a chance to see some of that. You know, it does look a lot different. You don't just see a whole bunch of feathers or anything like that.
Sure.
You see it in the developmental phase. I wonder if it's something like this. I don't know. I'd like to see more research on it, actually.
Yeah, and the feathers don't really, I mean, they're definitely not, they don't look like flight feathers. So it could be that they're just collagen fibers, maybe the feathers have degraded, or maybe they just never were feathers in the first place. We just don't know enough at this point to know what to make of it, and so, exactly, but it has nothing to do with evolution. You know, that's the important thing to remember. It is a created
Sure.
animal, okay, of some kind that God created, the original kind on probably, if it's a bird, then day 5 of creation week. If it's something else, maybe day 6. I don't know. If it has wings,
Sure. If it's
probably
flying
day
creature,
5.
Yeah.
If it's a flying creature, and we do know that it didn't evolve from something else. And
You
so,
have variations within
Right.
those kinds. That's not a
Right.
problem.
And if
Yep.
it is a unique mosaic, it has fully functioning parts, just like
Right.
the platypus. Unique combination of things put together, but they're all fully functioning. Nothing evolving
Hey,
from one thing to another.
Hey, let me interrupt you here. Someone
yeah.
says AIG people always interrupt each other, and that's
Wait,
actually
hold
part.
on, stop.
We do.
Yeah, that's actually part
always
of the
do.
program. We're supposed to do
That's
that.
the only way you can get a word in. So, but they call it, I thought this paper was funny, they called it a flying dinosaur squirrel.
That's
Okay,
exactly
I'm not
what
sure
I
what
was
a flying
thinking.
dinosaur squirrel is. Apparently that's it. So, they're even, the evolutionists are having trouble kind of knowing what to do it. And as creationists, we would look at it and say, has a lot of characteristics of a bird, but we're really not sure without
Yeah.
further research. So hopefully that will be forthcoming, but
Well, it makes you wonder too. In the future when people are looking at fossils, and sometimes they see these things. Be very careful. Sometimes there might be evidence of a membrane. Sometimes they're like, "There's the bones. Let's chip away and get to it," and they just
Right.
destroyed some good pieces of evidence that could have helped us out. So.
But the fact that it was preserved as well as it was, too, with the collagen fibers or whatever those things are on it, the membranous wing, if that's really what it was, that's soft tissue, okay, some of that.
amazing.
And so that means it can't be that old. It can't be
Right.
millions and millions of years old because soft tissue degrades very quickly.
What age did they put on this in the
163 million years ago.
163 million years
Yep.
ago. So, looking at this thing, it's more than likely a bird because, it's got different features. What it have a gizzard.
Gizzard
and-
stones,
Right.
yeah.
Gizzard stones and a number of different aspects that are bird. See, this is a huge problem in the evolutionary worldview. If you have a bird that far back in their worldview, how
Yeah.
could dinosaurs evolve into them when they were already around that long?
Yep.
That's a big problem in an evolutionary worldview.
Well, I think you were
So-
saying within this model, that means flight evolved 4 separate times now in evolutionary
4.
thinking.
Yeah.
By random chance.
Random
you
chance
got it 4
process, yeah.
times.
Yeah.
That's just totally unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's the
But see,
story.
this is why the researchers don't want this to be a bird.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, they want it to be, they say that basically these dinosaurs they say this fossil demonstrates that close to the origin of flight, dinosaurs closely related to birds were experimenting with a diversity of wing structures. Now, how exactly does a living organism experiment? Gee, I think I'll grow a membranous wing and see if that works. It doesn't, in order for it to be an experimenting, you have to have an experimenter,
Yeah.
somebody who's actually physically doing it.
When I was a kid, I tried to experiment with flight. I really wanted to fly, so I'd put a towel around me and be like, can I fly? And I'd jump, and I couldn't get there.
Yeah.
It just
It
didn't
doesn't
work. No
work.
matter how many experiments I
No
did.
matter how bad you want it.
By the way, Bodie, Craig says on here that flying dinosaur squirrel. Sounds delicious. What do you think, Bodie?
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think you want to shoot that one down and eat it though. So, somebody on here says hello from Wyoming, where we woke up to 3 inches of snow.
Oh,
Which
I'm
is why I
sorry.
don't
Aren't
live
you
in
guys
Wyoming.
thrilled about
We'll
that?
pray
We're
for
not in the
you.
snow right now.
Oh my
Lots
goodness.
of people checking
It was a long
in.
winter this year.
Craig, Dave.
They're still dealing with
people
it.
from Montana, North Carolina, Hannah,
Oh, yeah, I saw people
Amber,
from all
Avery's
over.
checking in. Saw Avery in the crowd
Texas,
earlier.
Georgia, Nova
Yep.
Scotia, Florida, New York.
Ooh, somebody speaking in
Lots
Spanish.
of
There we
different
go.
ones there. Great.
All right.
All right. 2 species of colorful stick insects discovered in Madagascar. And so I'm going to call this the peacock of the insect world, okay? Because most stick insects, if you've seen those, and sometimes we have those at our house, they're brown, right? Because that's the whole point. Right? They're supposed to resemble a stick so they don't get eaten. There's some really leafy ones. If you've ever been to those insect exhibits, you'll see they look
And
like
we've got
a
some
leaf.
of those, right? In
Yeah,
our
I think
insectorium,
we've
yeah.
got some over here in our
Insectorium.
insectorium. And so to find a stick insect that is very brilliantly colored doesn't make any sense, right,
Well, it just
from an
sticks out.
evolutionary standpoint. Yeah.
That's one.
There you go.
We got to get at least 3, right? We
Yeah,
got 1
we're supposed
down,
to do
2 to
3,
go.
so.
At least. All right.
So they don't know how to explain this from an evolutionary
Yeah.
standpoint because obviously in their idea, this thing would get eaten very quickly. It's only the males look like this. The females and the juveniles are more
Brown.
dull, and
Yeah.
so or are
They get
dull,
boring
so-
as they get older?
Yeah, not boring, but dull colored.
Yeah, they look like they have little thorns on them and stuff too.
Yeah.
Well, those come in various
makes
colors
me think
too.
of the sin and the curse, thorns and thistles.
And that's just one picture. We saw some that were blue,
Oh, yeah,
some that
all
were
different
green,
colors.
tons of different patterns. Very, very pretty.
Yeah.
There's tons of variation. Shows the creator's design. It shows his creativity, even with stick insects.
Well, and they're trying to explain this to say, well, how do you explain this evolutionary diversification? And I'm like, it's not, because it's not evolutionary.
Right.
It's not changing into something else. It's
Right.
just a diversification or variation in the color.
So stick insects change into stick insects.
Insects, yeah.
And
yeah.
show God's glory with the variation.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. And they try to
Very cool.
explain it. They try to say, well, maybe a lot of times insects or other things like frogs that are brightly colored, it's usually for a reason, okay? It says, don't eat me, I taste bad, or I'm toxic, right?
Right.
And
They put them in a sticky situation.
Oh, there we go. There's
Yeah.
two.
Okay.
There's
getting
two.
worse.
Oh.
So anyway, so they're trying to explain it. Maybe there's something about these insects that they don't know as far as like their toxins or they taste bad, or maybe it's because it makes them easier to see.
What
for
animal
the-
wants to go eat a stick anyway?
Well, for their mates to see them easier, so they
Sure.
don't blend in quite as well. We don't know. This is
Right.
on an island. It's on Madagascar, so sometimes things can go a little differently depending on if there's not a predator for these things. Maybe that's what allowed the variation to become prominent.
That's
we
possible.
don't know, but it's not evolution. It's just variation within the stick
Yeah.
insect kind.
By the
So-
way, Bodie, Craig said he enjoyed your pun. He said it
Oh,
was a good
good.
one.
I'm glad someone appreciated
And
it.
then Shannon from Oregon says, yes, I'm watching from Portland, Oregon. Yes, some of us actually believe in the truth in Oregon. She was just throwing that out there. So glad you're watching,
Yeah.
Shannon. Yeah.
Somebody on here said, my boys love visiting the insectorium at the Creation Museum. Last summer, they made their own.
Really?
Ugh. Good for you. I don't want somebody making
Flies,
it. Things better be
ticks.
dead, is all I got to say if they're going to bring them in the house. All right. Trans athlete demolishes 4 women's powerlifting world records. So this is about Mary Gregory, and even though there's a female name, this is a male, okay, who's claiming to be a female,
Right.
and entered this competition for powerlifting and broke 4 records in women's powerlifting. Well, of course he did, because
Correct.
he's a he.
Yeah.
He broke records in the squat, the bench press, the deadlift, and the total accumulation of the weight,
Yeah.
which would be equivalent to me going and competing in a basketball tournament for 5-year-olds at the YMCA and breaking all the records.
Yeah.
Right? Of course I would. That's what you would expect.
Well, I don't know about your talent.
I think
There
even
might
I
might
can
be
do
good
really
that.
competition from those kids.
Some of those 5-year-olds are good. I'll give you that. But
Oh, my.
yeah.
Just picking on you there.
But it is sad to see because it really does lead to the destruction of women's sports. Because how can a biological female compete
Yeah.
with a biological male?
Well,
in
and we're
some of these
starting to
cases,
see that,
right?
even among the female athletes out there who are promoting transgender, say,
Right.
oh, no, let them do it. And now all of a sudden they're beating everyone,
Like,
and now they're
uh-oh.
backing off like, well, we don't like this. This isn't fair.
Yep.
But that's what you asked for. I mean, I hate
Yeah.
to say it that way.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to watch the civil war taking place within the leftist ideology because
Yeah.
you have the LGBT movement with this new moral, sexual, gender revolution butting up against the feministic movement, which has been fighting for women's rights for years, and they are in direct conflict, right? Because if there's not a woman by definition, then what are you fighting for as a feminist?
Right. That's
It's
the thing.
totally
I'm like,
arbitrary.
everything the
Yeah.
feminists have fought so long for has just been destroyed because you're allowing these men to compete with women, and you can't deny basic biology. I mean,
Right.
they will have bigger hearts. They will have bigger lungs. They will have more muscle mass. That is something that happens. That's just biological. That happens as they're going through puberty,
Right.
and no woman will be able to match that, at least from a strictly natural standpoint.
There will be some exceptions, but the general rule of thumb
Well,
would be what
they
you
might
just
get
said.
they might be able to
Right,
have
right.
more. Some women do
Right,
have
right.
more testosterone than others, but they're still not going to match the level of a man. There's
Right.
just no way.
Unless it's Brian. you
Yeah.
know.
Well,
Oh,
No. We got a
we
target
have
on
to
your
wrestle.
back. Let
We
me
have
get
to
that off
wrestle
your
when we're
back
done.
today.
No.
But somebody said, it's actually Martina Navratilova, the famous tennis player who's
You might
who's
remember
come
her.
out as gay, and even though she's supportive of transgender and all that, she says, but not in sports. She says this is insane and it's cheating, and
Right.
it really is. It's not fair to all those women athletes who have worked so hard to get to where they are, and you never hear about this
Well,
in the
yeah.
opposite way, do you? You never
Right.
hear about women beating the guys' records, right? Even if they're a transgender female and they identify, or transgender, see, I always get this confused. They're a transgender female who identifies as male. She's never going to win anything, right? Because she can't compete. There's no way. She can't.
Well, and it's been interesting too. Martina Navratilova, when she spoke out against this, what's happening, she's been essentially disowned by the LGBT community. She's been thrown underneath the bus, and she's been an advocate for them for years, decades, and a public face for them. And then just at this one kind of conflict, she's been disowned.
Right. Well, there's a battle within LGBT. I mean, L is lesbian, and that predicates that women actually do exist. But then LGBT is transgender, which says woman doesn't really exist. It's fluid. You can shift between. So, I mean, there's a battle even within that, within their own camp.
And I think we need to recognize fundamentally, this is a battle between God's word and man's. Does man get to arbitrarily define what gender is and is not, or does God define what gender is? And of course, God does. We know that in truth. And we find that definition in the book of Genesis, chapters 1 to 11. And again, if you dismiss that biblical history, you just gave up your foundation for the biblical doctrines you need to fight against this ideology that's attacking gender and God's word today in different ways.
Right. Now hormones technically are drugs, right?
Technically.
Technically they would be.
Right.
If you're taking them, from that standpoint.
Yeah, from that standpoint. It's interesting in here. Navratilova says, letting men compete as women simply if they change their name and take hormones is unfair. Now, if you were to take hormones and a host of other sports, or some other drug that would enhance your ability, I mean, that's typically seen as taking drugs to, performance-enhancing drugs, which is typically seen as illegal. Here it's applauded.
Yeah.
Right.
I know. They just can't be consistent with it. And it just shows you, again, I think dealing with the reality of these things, like a lot of times I think the people on the left have dealt with this just in a hypothetical sense or in a not dealing with it in reality sense. And I remember reading an article by a woman who was very much transgender, LGBT, all that. And she said, when she was in the women's restroom and she saw a man walk in. And she said, all of a sudden I realized this was not a good way to think. The reality of it hit her because she's like, okay, now what am I supposed to do? Because this is what it leads to, right? This thinking has outcomes, and are you willing to deal with the outcomes of that? And so it's a problem. Definitely a problem.
So I got to read a comment here. I enjoy everyone, but today's panel is my favorite group, Georgia, Brian, and Bodie.
Wow, look at that.
Sorry, Ken.
Whoever that was. I know, right? Hey, by the way, I will say this, Bodie, that Joyce Cooper says here, when it comes to puns, Bodie has a real stick-to-itiveness about him.
Oh, do not encourage him, people. Do not.
Hannah was saying, go, Bodie, Dr. Bodie puns. Right. I'm like, don't encourage Bodie. Don't do that.
I'm a little squirrely sometimes.
Oh, yeah, you are. Yeah, it gets a little sticky, but anyway.
So we just talked about transgender, but the world is actually a weirder place, than that. CNN promotes adults who transition from human species to identify as mermaids.
Wait. You need to say that just one more time.
No, I'm not even saying it. I don't even want to look at the picture, okay?
It's a little disturbing. Not going
These people are mermaiding, and they get
is that an adjective?
Huh?
Mermaiding?
That's what it's called. I'm just reading it.
I know, but is that a real word?
Well, it's in scare quotes, so I don't know. But they get custom mermaid tails to put over their legs. And
men and women, by the way. This is not
men and
just
women, So they mermans and mermaids, I guess. Men and women. But they want people to know that they're just normal.
Because normal people do this all the time.
Yeah, they have normal lives, but they just like to pretend. Well, they like to identify. I shouldn't say pretend. They like to identify though as a mermaid.
So if you identify something, and in our culture today, it has been imposed upon us if a man identifies as a woman that they are a woman, right?
Right.
And vice versa.
Sure.
So if somebody says, I identify as a mermaid, that means mermaids are real. That's what CNN's saying here, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, and then the inconsistency is blaring because what if you identify as the President of the United States? Does that make you the President of the United States? Or that, hey,
no, it doesn't make you
the cop pulls me over when I'm speeding. I caught you speeding. I don't identify as a speeder. I identify as a law-abiding citizen. Therefore, I get no ticket.
Next window,
right?
please.
That doesn't work in reality. It only works in playtime. And essentially, these are adults playing pretend right? To try to find some source of happiness in their life because we live in a broken world and we need our ultimate source, which is in Christ alone, but they're avoiding that.
Yeah. Well, it says they meet, I had to laugh at this. They meet more online on Facebook and social media than actually in the water. Duh, because they're human beings. They don't live in water. I was like, oh my gosh. And so anyways, but that just, it shows you, like, we laugh at that, but people are living their lives like this, right? And it's just so sad.
You know how some people have those flippers for swimming? I have a monofin. And I don't think I'm going to use that anymore. Hey, you're part of my club. You want to come hang out on the internet with us?
I'm a little worried about you, Bodie. We need to talk after this is over. I don't know about the monofin.
Those little monofins are actually kind of cool, but
that's a transition into mermaiding. Be careful.
Yeah, it might be.
Well, somebody on here commented, and I know you'll like this comment, Brian. It says, maybe God has turned them all over to their sexual immorality so that it will all play out, it says, and fall apart because we are now seeing how ridiculous this gets. But that's exactly right.
That's what it is. That's what we see in Romans 1.
Well, and I told them, I was reading the article earlier, and I literally went and printed out Romans chapter 1 because it's exactly what I thought of.
I was that close to doing it. I'm impressed you did it.
And I'll read part of it, not the whole thing, but Romans 1, verse 21, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him, but they became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings, birds, animals, and reptiles.
And mythical creatures.
And mythical creatures and mermaids, and it's reflected in that. And really, this just reminds us, it shows the noetic effects of the fall. Once man sinned, it corrupted all of creation. It even busted the thinking of mankind. Our thinking is busted. It is broken by the effects of the fall, and we see that. And it needs correction through God's word and through his spirit.
Well, it even says towards the end, one of the people that does this says, I sometimes joke that I wear a prosthetic, meaning a prosthetic mermaid tail, because I was born with a terrible birth defect, which is legs. And I thought, how insulting, first of all, to people that are born with either defective legs or no legs at all, but also that is just a direct insult to God's good design. I mean, he didn't design you to be a mermaid. He designed you to be a human being, and human beings have legs. So that's that's a slap, in my opinion, in the face of God and his design for human beings. So, yeah.
Craig says here, let them try breathing underwater and see how that turns out for them.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Probably not.
So if you catch one in the neck, can you put them on the fish market?
Yeah. Well, see?
Is there a hunting season or a fishing season
here.
for it?
Yeah.
Well, Joyce just said here, so is Bodie getting fishy on us?
Might be.
With your...
Hey, there's somebody that says, my daughter loves her monofin, but she's still human.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, little kids, do those things, don't swim through the water just to be silly or, something fun. But this is a whole different
Yeah, it's a whole different
But it's
category.
also, it kind of shows our desire to be autonomous.
Yeah.
I will identify as what I
true.
want to be. I can define who I am, not you, God. I'll do it.
Yeah.
At any given moment.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so let's go on to some good news,
Yes,
right?
please.
Squid skin inspires creation of next generation space blanket.
Great, they're going to make mermaid tails out of this.
Well, I said maybe the mermaids could use it. But anyways, okay.
Good connection.
So this is an example of what we call biomimicry. So it's taking something that we see in nature that's been obviously designed by God and making it useful, engineering it for human purposes so that we can take advantage of that design.
Yeah.
Bodie's an engineer, so he loves
a famous example of that is Velcro. They looked at the cocklebur. For those of you who've been out on farms and stuff like that, you end up with a cocklebur on you, pull it off. That's where Velcro came from. It's a brilliant design, actually, when it comes down to it. This is another one of those examples. So.
And the skin cells, basically, of the squid, so it depends on whether they're really close together or if they're further apart, and that helps them control the temperature, their own temperature. So they're able to regulate that.
Right,
and so they're trying to form
shape.
Materials like that can change shape, basically, to allow the temperature of the person that's wearing it or whatever to increase or decrease.
So I don't think they're actually harvesting any squid.
No.
For this. They're just mimicking what God had designed there.
Yeah.
And they're thinking they can use this in spacesuits and things like that.
They can make some really cool things, right?
Space applications.
Talking about making clothes that can actually adjust your own temperature.
For those of you who are regular watchers of Answers News, a number of times we've ended up talking about the supposed octopuses that out in the secular world they're claiming are aliens and came here on asteroids and that sort of thing. And
Right.
Now I'm wondering, did they bring the squid with them? With their.
I don't know. Maybe. So
It's always
Could
been
have been.
interesting,
it's kind of crazy.
thought
I
on
mean,
that.
I am the type of person. Literally, I am always cold. Okay, I doesn't. It can be. It would have to be about 80, 85 degrees outside for me not to be cold.
Do you keep a blanket in the trunk of your car?
I actually do.
That's what my wife does. That's how I know. Yes.
Proof of
But
it.
I am always cold. So I love this idea because it says like you could wear it at work and, because depending on the office space, it can be really warm, it can be really cool. You could self-adjust your clothing to make you feel certain temperature regardless of what's outside. So I'm personally all
See, if
for
they can
that.
have gloves like that, because my fingers get cold in the office, and I'm like typing, and I look up and everything's spelt wrong, and I'm like, my fingers aren't moving right.
By the way, I just got to share this. Sarah made a comment down here. She said, I tuned in as soon as you guys showed the mermaid picture of the man. She's like,
Oh, no.
what did I walk into? Which was
What kind of show
hilarious.
is this?
I feel your pain.
Oh my
All right.
gosh.
Well, we've got a couple of books actually that Answers in Genesis sells. One of them I wanted to point out is Discovery of Design. This is Dr. Don DeYoung and Derek Hobbs. They are looking at a lot of these fascinating features where they've used some of God's design out in nature, whether it's plants or animals, and they've been able to apply it to certain pieces of research or different designs that we've utilized. And this is a fascinating book, Discovery of Design, if you like that kind of stuff. And Dr. Stuart Burgess, he's a professor over in the UK. He did a talk for us at our Best of British conference where he's talking about design and some of these different features, and this particular DVD is the design argument, and both
he's an engineer,
are
and
excellent.
so he knows this very well because he uses
Right.
that a lot in his research. And
In
design,
fact, his
so.
research, he's been involved in the NVSat, the satellite, $1 billion satellite over in Europe.
arm,
He also helped design some mechanism stuff for bicycles that
and that
helped the UK dominate
the
in the
Rio
Olympics.
it was in the Rio Olympics, I
Yeah.
think, and it helped the team win that
Yeah.
particular event. So
Yeah.
the cycle's designed by him.
So yeah,
it's
I mean,
really cool.
he's a brilliant mind. So.
Yep. All right. Smelling with your tongue. All right. Now, as we were talking beforehand, to us it's kind of like.
I wonder what that smells
duh,
like.
Doesn't everyone
Kinda like-
know that smell and taste are like directly
Definitely related.
linked, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but what I said was. True, we might intuitively know that, but you have to then prove it, so to speak. You've got to show it with research. And so that's what this did. They basically figured out that your taste cells on your tongue actually have olfactory receptors in them. Olfactory receptors are, we typically
What's in
thought
your
were only
nose?
found in your nose and allow you to smell, but it turns out
Right.
they're on your tongue too. And he has some like nice stories about that. So.
Well, you ever been someplace where there's a really bad smell in the air, and maybe someone tells you, don't breathe through your nose, breathe through your mouth? And I'm like, no, that's gross too. I can still taste it
So
or
just
smell it.
don't
Doesn't-
breathe.
I don't know how you get around that, but I'm just saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is neat to see the connection. And
See-
basically, what they're finding out is this is so much more complicated than they thought it was, which doesn't surprise us. But they're really trying to figure out the details of how this actually works. And it kind of makes sense. You think about it when you're really sick. I'm a little nasally right now from my allergies. When your nose gets stuffed up, you can't taste stuff as well. There is that connection. We know that from experience, but like you said, George, they're trying to prove that scientifically has been
Right,
difficult.
they've got to show it. And,
Right.
and they're hoping, too, that being able to test it this way will be good because they don't actually know which olfactory receptors go with which smell because we have over 400 different types, and that's why we can smell so many
amazing.
different things. So they're hoping this system will be a way that they can do this actually in a dish, basically, to kind of
Well,
figure
here's
it out.
something curious. If it works this way, your mouth basically can do some aspects of smell. Does your nose do some aspects of taste?
I don't know.
Well, we'll
we
see
could
what the
try that on you,
researchers-
Bodie. So
Yeah,
we'll have you
we'll do
put certain things
experiments.
up your nose.
Put something- hey, boy, I do taste that.
But one of the things they said here, of course, they always have to put in something about evolution, right?
yeah.
And it says that they think taste molecules, being able to taste things, evolved as a gatekeeper to evaluate the nutrient value and potential toxicity of what we put in our mouths. Okay, well, what if you put something really toxic in there and died? You would die before that
and you can't
had
pass
the
that on,
capability of
right?
evolving.
Yeah, it doesn't really help.
Doesn't really work very well.
And you don't evolve something just because you
Wow, that
need
kind of
it,
tastes like
right?
cyanide.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead with your point.
No, I just actually had a different point. I just remember, you might have seen it on Facebook or a different social media platform, the video of a guy, this is his diet, he's kind of joking, but he takes a hamburger and he sniffs the hamburger, one big sniff, then he grabs the broccoli to the side and he chews the broccoli. And he sets it down and he sniffs the hamburger again and he eats the broccoli. I just thought that's the actual demonstration of what they're talking about.
That's right, what they did in the lab, right?
That's what they did in the lab.
Oh my word. All right, that's funny. So, okay, I think we got time for one more here.
Yeah,
this one
let's do
shouldn't
it.
take us
All
too
right, let's run
long.
through
What the vibrant pigments of bird feathers can teach us about how evolution works. Not really. It's not about how evolution works. It's about how adaptation, speciation, variation
So
works.
they're equivocating on those.
Right, they're
Always.
equivocating the terms. And it just talks about these bird species, and they said what they found out is, so how birds get really highly pigmented is they're able to use certain biochemical pathways to convert carotenoids, which are pigments found in the foods they eat, into pigments that they display on their feathers and on their skin, okay? So they say they found that birds have various biochemical pathways for doing this and using different carotenoids so they can use different resources. You know, if one isn't available, they can use this one to do it. Okay. But that doesn't explain how the biochemical pathways came to be in the first place to do that.
That's right. How did the system get
yeah.
there that's amazingly complex that can do this amazing thing they're summarizing?
So it really didn't answer the question.
It doesn't answer
They're
the
kind of talking
question.
about how it
Yeah,
operates, but not how it originated. And that's what we
Right,
see
right.
so often. Then the conflation of variation adaptation to the idea of molecules to man, evolution,
Right.
right?
You know, regarding that last article, there's a couple of comments here.
Oh, boy.
One is that joke kind of stunk. And the other is that it was a tasteless joke. So I'm getting impressed with our audience out
They-
here.
All right. Well, somebody on here said
Gary-
I laughed really hard once and got chewed up Skittles up my nose.
Did they taste
I
them?
don't recommend trying that experiment. It was not pleasant. So, anyways, thanks for
that's-
sharing that
that's funny.
information. But again, like we've seen this over and over again
Right.
a lot in this particular episode, is that evolution is not the same thing as natural selection, variation, speciation, adaptation. Those don't result in anything other than birds being birds or insects being insects or whatever. It doesn't do that. It's just variation and great design for these birds so that they can
Yeah.
use multiple pathways.
See,
in
I would
multiple
rather see
situations.
research funds go toward this stuff to say, how can we use this? How can we
Right.
turn that into something from a good engineering
Yeah.
perspective? You know, I think we'd be better off doing that than telling stories on it.
And it's all amazing confirmation of the biblical truth that God made things
Right.
according to their kinds, tons of variation,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because He is creative, has infinite, He has all-powerful knowledge. We expect to see that, and we do. Good confirmation of that
All right.
truth.
All right. Well, we're out of
God bless
time
you.
for today. So we
Yep.
will be back on Monday at 2 o'clock. So we'll see you then.
Have a good day. See you guys.